If I could personally title this video anything without the fear that people might not click on it, I would probably title it The Hard Work of Healing. Because that's what it is for Luz. And it is a lot of hard work, and it does require entertaining this reality of fragmentation, of this loss of this individual sense of unity and cohesion. Not just the loss of innocence, though it is that, but it's something a bit broader and a bit not only related to childhood. It's this fundamental sense that there was once a proper and clear idea of how she related to the world. It wasn't all fairy tales and rainbows, but there was a basic sense of coherence and clarity to it. Now she has lost that, and since that image, that conception, that worldview is so heavily tied to her basic sense of self, she doesn't really know how to interact with herself and the world around her anymore. She is paralyzed by guilt, paralyzed by these crippling feelings of unworthiness, of sorrow and despondency, of the idea that she is always getting in the way of others, always making the lives of others worse by forcing them into difficult situations. This is a major change, and not really a positive one, from the Luz that we all know. The Luz who is such a daring optimist, even to the point of foolishness at times. That version of Luz was not always perfect. She could be very flawed and very silly at times. But there was this confidence, this buoyant optimism, this idealism about the future, this trust in this magic world that she landed in that allowed her to really help people. Amity or even Hunter would not have necessarily gotten all the help that they needed if it were not for Luz. She is this major glue between all these figures in the show. She is not just the protagonist because she's the character who gets the most screen time and she is a kind of leader. She's really at the core of the show. So many of these bonds and relationships would not exist if it were not for Luz. Remove Luz and the action and interaction that makes the show what it is would not be possible. Heidegger talks about this sense of loss as being a fundamental feature of our phenomenological experience with the world in which we live. It is a part of being in the world, a part of Dasein, as he says, which is very hard to explain exactly what that word means. It's something like being that understands itself to be being. I think that would be the clearest way to put it. It's this fundamental willing consciousness that is always trying to distract itself because looking at things clearly reveals relationships to be bounded by a sense of dissolution, by a sense of inevitable transience. This is what Heidegger means when he talks about death as this ultimate horizon for meaning and significance. It sounds morbid, and it is in a certain way, but what he is getting at is that, drawing from someone like Schopenhauer, and I'm not going to go into Schopenhauer, I do not want to get this even more bogged down with philosophy than it already is. All things are tending toward their dissolution. All images, all ideas, all values, all goals, all plans. What marks the horizon, the outer bounds of those things, is their eventual dissolution. And as we experience them, they are inevitably going to dissolve because we ourselves are inevitably tied to this world of constant change, constant turmoil, constant transience. And so these things that we want to be solid, these basic conceptions of ourselves and what we want, and our basic relationality with the world around us, meaning not just our relationships with our friends and loved ones or our relationship with ourselves, but our general relationships with the basic character of an environment that we enter into. All these hopes and aspirations and all of these longings and all of these anxieties that are evoked when we go to a certain place or are in a certain stage in our lives, or simply arise out of the situations that we encounter in the world. All of that is inevitably fading, and we don't want that. And yet, Heidegger talks very eloquently about how a true sense of understanding, and ultimately a sense of what's not quite peace, but is certainly a sense of quietude, a sense of a relief from inner turmoil, comes when we understand that these things are transient, that we need to stop distracting ourselves with these illusions of absolute permanence. Heidegger talks about this as a basic ontological feature of our reality in being in time. Someone like Hannah Arendt talks very specifically about this being a feature of the modern world. Hannah Arendt views ideology, not simple lowercase I ideology like a political belief, but capital I ideology, a basic framework for explaining the world, as coming as a result of a sense of fundamental degradation and alienation and atomization. It is a sense that you once had this solidity in your social relationships and your relationship with your history, not just your personal history, but the vast history that comes before you, with a sense of community, with a sense of ritual and tradition, and then that has been lost. There's a basic sense, she says, in a pre-industrial world, a world that is not completely absent from the world of change, but is not fully subject to it in the same way that the modern world is. There is a basic sense of solidity. There is a basic sense of societal renewal. Sure, people, individuals, die and experience a sense of dissolution, but there is this greater sense of stability that can be found. Hannah Arendt says that this is not really true anymore because the world, the fundamental value systems and fundamental philosophies and fundamental things that we take for granted as true, the basic mores and expectations in the world, are inevitably changing nowadays. And I think this is very true to Luce. She is someone who, while she's not happy at the start of the show, she is more prone to acting out in a childish way than actively depressed in the true sense of that term, actively despondent. And then she goes to this magical world, and it's awesome, and it's beautiful, and while she takes an overly idealized perception of it at first, she, over time, grows to cultivate a greater sense of understanding and appreciation for this world. Her interactions with it become true. They become grounded in emotionality, in the fears and laments that she shares with others, in the hopes and aspirations that she shares with others, with people like Ida and King, and with people like Amity, Hunter, and the like. And yet, this cannot last. She is sent into this fundamental sense of these ideals that were such an elevation for her from her ordinary mundane life, degrading to a certain extent. They degrade because the threat of Balos becomes far more permanent and far more visceral. They degrade because she has to try to balance the relationship between herself and the human world and the part of herself that wants to stay in the Boiling Isles and all the friends she has there and all the family she has there. It's the sense that these simple, reassuring solutions do not work anymore, and she is left in a sense of not just dissatisfaction, but this profound sense of guilt. Luce is fundamentally concerned about her friends and her family. That's not a lie, that's not a deception. But nonetheless, her selflessness is a bit of a cover for this selfish, or at least self-interested, sense of uncertainty about what she should want. She wants to have this fundamentally stable and fixed image of the kind of life she had in the Boiling Isles early on, before she was forced to confront the implications of that kind of life. She wants to retreat into the sense of having these absolutely firm and secure ideas of what she is and what she should want and what she needs to do. Heidegger says that we can retreat from this fundamental sense of degradation, this fundamental sense of fragmentation, through simple, silly things like gossip or idle talk or petty curiosity. But he also says that we can try to escape through committing ourselves to some basic ideological, philosophical framework that does not fully force us or even allow us to confront the fundamentally destabilized, fundamentally fraught, intense situation that we are actually in. Hannah Arendt talks about ideology as having the same function in the modern world. It is an escape. Not in the simple sense of, oh hey, I'm going to put my fingers in my ears and pretend like I'm in some fairy world, but in the sense that ideology provides answers. It provides a clear and absolute framework for looking at yourself, your identity, your position in the world. Luce retreating into this sense of self-loathing is kind of that for her. I'm not saying that she's doing this intentionally, and I'm not saying that her self-loathing isn't real. I'm saying that she takes on this role of thinking that she is this horrible, vile person because she cannot think of herself as this grand saint anymore, this youthful, playful, naive adventurer anymore. And viewing herself in the most negative possible light is easier for her than confronting the fullness and the messy, jagged complexity of what her relationships with others actually are, what the burden on her actually is, what the issues that she needs to figure out actually are. She erects this superego of sorts, telling her that she needs to remain on Earth and never go to the Boiling Isles, and has that be her mother, even though her mother does not actually want that of her. Part of that is simple miscommunication, but a greater part of it is this desire to have this binary opposition, to have this sense of either I need to do clear absolute thing A or clear absolute thing B. I either need to absolutely stay on Earth, never go back, or I go to the Boiling Isles and I am locked in this struggle that causes the people I love quite a lot of harm and difficulty, that makes their lives harder than they otherwise would be. This is not true. But to truly let go of this dichotomous perspective and to truly accept that, yes, she has done things wrong. Yes, she needs to let go of that simple, childish view of herself, but also that she was very helpful to others and to herself during her time on the Boiling Isles requires a greater sense of comprehension. It requires her to try to put together these pieces of a fragmented world into some broader, truer sense of how she understands herself and how she understands her relationship with the world in which she lives in, her social environment, and all the people she's growing to care about. That's a difficult challenge, and I wish her the best in completing it. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked your stuff today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Owl House. Great show. Adios, comrades.